And welcome back to another edition of the Bleav in the Mets podcast as we continue our 2024 recap series. Chris Schubert, Jack McKessie here with you. If you are just joining us in the middle here, pause the episode, go back, listen to the first part of this series where we discussed the infielders and catchers on this roster, did a little season recap, season in review for all those guys, and talked about the free agents that are to be in that group and kind of gave a little bit of a primer to free agency. Today, we're going to get to the outfielders and DHs on this 40-man roster going into 2024, and then pitching we'll get into next week on the pod. Jack, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Excited to see that the Mets have already contacted Juan Soto, already putting out those feelers ahead of free agency. Took less than 24 hours from the World Series being over for the Mets to reach out and say, hey, we'd like Juan Soto on our baseball team next year. How about we chat? And I don't know what potential follow-up meetings there will be there, but I do like that my baseball team is interested in discussing having Juan Soto on it next year. That's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
He might be one of the outfielders, so we might as well parlay that into discussing the outfielders here today on the show. But before we do that, got to tell you about BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, NHL to entertainment and political props, just head on over to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. We'll start with the left fielder for the New York Mets in 2024, that being the former center fielder for the New York Mets, Brandon Nimmo, the homegrown Met, as my friend Jack put in the notes here, very importantly, entering the third year of that 8-year, $162 million deal that he signed with the New York Mets to return home. And I would describe the 2024 campaign for Brandon Nimmo as a mixed bag, because there were pockets of time where he looked like the Brandon Nimmo that should be an all-star, that could be a 300 hitter, that can hit 20 to 25 home runs and just be the all-around great Met that we have seen him to be. And then there were phases where, whether it was injury or he was struggling, something mechanically wasn't there, he looked lost at the plate. And I don't remember a year where a manager had to move Brandon Nimmo around in a lineup as much as Carlos Mendoza did with Brandon Nimmo this year, to just try to find a way to spark him and get him going and find him that consistency. So a mixed bag, but it's Brandon Nimmo. He's going to be the starting left fielder for this team in 2024. But when I look back, I wonder what could have been for his regular season.
Yeah, I feel like when he came out and said that he had been playing through plantar fasciitis since May, a lot of things started to add up, because it felt like you said, there were a lot of moments where he was up, and then it feels like almost more moments where he was down. And that kind of led to a slash line of 224, 327, 399 with a batting average that was the second lowest of his career since 2019, where he only played 69 games because of injury. So I think when I look at this season for Brandon Nimmo, I'm going to take into account that plantar fasciitis thing, because that's no joke to have to deal with throughout the ups and downs of 162 games in a season. And we saw what he looked like in the playoffs when he said it was flaring up again. Kind of a similar thing with a mixed bag, ups and downs. So I don't want to put too much thought into, 2024's performance being indicative of how the rest of this deal is going to play out. I think we're going to see more of a return to form, maybe a higher batting average, while maintaining some of that same slugging like he had in 2023. But this year is kind of a bit of a wash for Nimmo, I guess. But in general, I thought he was, serviceable.
Yeah, it's fun to have a year where it's your down year and you still hit 23 homers and drove in 90 runs. Like,
right.
That's to have that as your down year shows you the back of your baseball card has got some pretty good numbers on it. And I think where I fall on this is it was disappointing to see him struggle this year. And obviously you can probably attribute a good portion of it to the injury. But at the end of the day, I have more of a sample size of Brandon Nimmo being a good to great baseball player, being an all-star caliber baseball player, than I do this one outlier season that he had this year. And so that's why I'm willing to accept the injury being a reason why he struggled and just was battling it throughout the entirety of the year. He had his F4 this year was 2.7, which you note is the lowest in a season with 100 plus games, but it was third on the Mets this year. So I think that really shows you how valuable he was to this Mets team despite not being the best version of himself, while also, I think, further emphasizing how special this run that the Mets went on is that Brandon Nimmo in his down year was the third most valuable Met on this team with a 2.7 F4. So just another stat that just shows you just what a wild ride this was. But I think to close the book on Brandon before we get into the center fielders, Tyrone Taylor and Harrison Bader, look, Brandon Nimmo is a good baseball player. Brandon Nimmo will continue to be a good baseball player. I'm not concerned about what happened this year. It was disappointing to see him struggle, but I think at the end of the day, they are going to get him right, get him healthy, and I expect to see the old school version of Brandon Nimmo in 2025.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree 100%. It is worth noting, though, he stole 15 bases this year, even despite the injury. That is a career high for him. So if he's able to be more of a menace on the base paths, hitting, near the top of the order, it's going to be really nice to have him as a setup guy for some of the power hitters in the middle and bottom of the lineup.
Athleticism. It's where the game is going. You just saw the Los Angeles Dodgers win a World Series because they had a lot of talent, but they also had a lot of athleticism. They could play good defense. They could take the extra base. They had speedsters out there. They just were able to do those little extra things. And I guarantee you the Mets took some notes from that series that they played against the Dodgers, and they are going to try to get more athletic. They were more athletic in 2024 than they were in 2023, and I think they're going to continue that trend to get more athletic, to be able to increase those edges where you have them. With the way that the rules are currently written in baseball, you need to utilize the stolen base and utilize that ability to take those extra bases. So yeah, Brandon stealing 15 bases. He's never going to be a 30-40 stolen base guy, but if you're going to tell me that somebody in the top half of the order is a 20 steal guy, that's something valuable to have. Let's go to the center field spot, and I guess we'll start with Harrison Bader, who is a free agent. I don't necessarily expect him to be back on this team next season. I think the biggest takeaway that I had from Harrison Bader is when they signed him, the thought was, okay, this is clearly David Stern showing us defense is important to him. And he's going to sign players that are incredibly defensive minded, that are going to help increase the floor of the team defensively. And when he signed Harrison Bader, I can remember the tweet that defense and speed are what he's trying to add to this team, that being David Stearns. And that's what Harrison Bader provided. And you knew what you were getting. You were getting a player that had an injury history, a player that provided you excellent center field defense and could hit lefties. But other than that, the batting line was not going to be what you wanted it to be. And overall, while I think August, September, and the postseason where he was just non-existent because they couldn't even use him was a disappointing end for Harrison Bader, he played in 143 games. The injury stuff never popped up with him. Like, to me, that's a success. Like, the Mets identified a guy that had an injury profile and said, we think we can get more out of him than everybody else can. And credit to Harrison Bader for buying in and doing the work and being able to be healthy for 143 games. But to me, the takeaway here is that the Mets are able to keep guys healthy. Like, they've changed some stuff inside that has been super helpful. And while he only hit 236 and didn't provide the offense that you maybe would have liked him to, he was as advertised. I think even more so because of the number of games he played in.
Yeah, I think, this is a guy that when the Mets signed, this was pretty much the ideal outcome. Like, decent 8-9 hitter, a guy that can steal bases. 17 this year, the second highest of his career. Played every game that they needed him to in center field. Just a really solid bottom of the lineup guy, I think. And the defense was honestly notably good, which was also nice to see. So I don't really have a lot to take away from the Harrison Bader season that we just watched. I remember early in the season, he was kind of one of the only guys that seemed to be really hitting at all. And so for him to fall off later in the season, now, things even out in the end, but don't have a ton to take away from Harrison Bader here. He was a nice part of this team. I don't really foresee a spot for him going forward on the 2025 Mets.
No, mainly in part because of the guy we're going to talk about next. But I think the other thing that I'll say about Harrison Bader to close the book on him is that I don't think I've ever felt as comfortable with somebody patrolling center field for the New York Mets since Juan Lagares was out there. Like, it was, the ball got hit, and if I knew it was in the park, Harrison Bader was going to get to it if it was in center field. Like, it was an automatic. The way he plays that position is awesome. And I think I'll tell you this. Somebody's going to sign Harrison Bader this offseason, and I don't know if they're going to get more than the Mets got out of him in 2024. I think that would be my prediction, is that he'll get a similar type deal, but I think the Mets will have gotten the peak value out of Harrison Bader. The other center fielder that is right now penciled in as the opening day center fielder for the New York Mets. I think that's probably where the betting odds would have it right now. I do think there's an opportunity for this team to improve at that position, but right now it is going to be Tyrone Taylor, who was acquired originally in the trade that was dubbed the Adrian Hauser trade that my good friend Jack McKessie likes to remind me now we need to refer to as the Tyrone Taylor trade now because of Adrian Hauser not being here anymore. And he came to this team, and you were told this is a guy that plays the game the right way, provides good defense, has pop in his bat, not going to wow you. And guess what? Tyrone Taylor played baseball the right way, hit for power, played good defense, was as advertised. Same thing with Harrison Bader. I mean, the center field position for the New York Mets was as advertised. It had a ceiling to it, and the ceiling was pretty low, but the floor was pretty high. And the floor, these guys hit the floor, and Tyrone Taylor was a big part of why.
I feel slightly better about Tyrone Taylor than I do about Harrison Bader, I think just because of recency bias. But in terms of the acquisition versus return on investment, like Tyrone Taylor has been great. And he's got a couple more years left of team control. He's entering his second year of arbitration right now. And look, I'm comfortable right now with him playing center field and being another bottom of the lineup spot. There were a lot of moments, throughout the whole season where he was coming up clutch in the bottom of the order and really provided, I wrote down here, a really nice anchor to those 7, 8, 9 spots. And I'm fully comfortable going forward with him patrolling center field. He made a nice catch in the NLCS that, ultimately didn't really mean anything, but it kind of showed you the kind of player he is. He's always prepared. He was always showing up ready to play, kind of a role player on the 2024 Mets, and a guy that I really think can be a solid starter for 2025 and maybe even to 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, a 98 WRC plus and a 99 OPS plus last year. Basically a league average hitter. And if you're telling me that I'm going to get a league average hitter with the type of defense that he was able to play and be able to play basically all 3 spots in the outfield, there's no question that he can't play all 3. Yeah. I think I'm okay with him being on the opening day roster as one of the starting 9 and being the guy that's patrolling center field. But I think only if they fill out some of the offensive needs elsewhere, right? Because I think going into this year, you had Starlin Marte, who you didn't know what you were going to get from him offensively. You had a third base spot, which at the time was Brett Beatty. You didn't know what you were going to get there offensively. And I think the Mets had too many spots offensively where they were going to struggle to get a 100 WRC plus, basically getting league average production. And so I think you can get away with one spot like that, where it's a league average hitter who is basically in there for his defense. But you start getting beyond that to 2, 3, and the bottom part of your lineup is mainly that. Then you start to shorten your lineup, and teams can really attack you. And so I would be comfortable with Tyrone Taylor as the opening day center fielder, as long as the other moves are made to make this offense more well-rounded, to where Tyrone Taylor is really the only guy that I look. That's at best the league average hitter. If they have league average and above hitters everywhere else, then I'll feel pretty good about it. But other than that, I think Tyrone Taylor is going to fit into that center fielder in the scenario I just outlined, or he's going to be your 4th outfielder off the bench. And that's a pretty nice weapon to have off the bench late in games to provide you that defensive replacement. Let's go to right field. And let's discuss Starling Marte, who's entering the final year of that 4-year, $78 million deal that just will never end. It feels like it's been an 8-year deal for Starling Marte. And look, he's old. He's not the player that he used to be. I would very much rather see Juan Soto play right field for the New York Mets next year than I would Starling Marte. How about that? How about that as my conclusion for Starling Marte's 2024? I mean, look, 269, he hit 7 home runs. The power's gone. He just doesn't have the power anymore. Yeah. I think if you were going to buy into him finding something late, he became just very much a singles contact hitter that just put the ball in play and put the ball where it needed to go. And there's value in the Mets having that on the roster, but I just don't know at 36, 37 years old if this is somebody that you want to be relying on as one of your everyday players that's going to go out there and try to produce for you. I think David Stearns can upgrade here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the obvious name is Juan Soto, right fielder, much younger than Starling Marte is. I appreciated what Starling Marte gave the Mets for the last 3 years, mostly 2022, all-star, great season. And this past year, it's just kind of another step down on the decline. Guy later in his career was a below average defender, unfortunately. And that's just kind of what happens to an aging right fielder. What was impressive to me, though, was he still provided some value as a contact hitter, like you said, but also on the base paths. Also 16 stolen bases this year, which was honestly extremely impressive for a guy who turned 36 in early October. So, like, I can see Marte providing value next year as a guy off the bench, but I think you said it perfectly. This is a spot that the Mets should be looking to upgrade. If not Soto, then probably someone else. But I think Marte can be a platoon outfielder and be a pinch hitter, pinch runner kind of guy, even though he's going to be 36 throughout, the entirety of next regular season.
And again, there are different ways for the 2025 Mets to line up, right? And if you told me that the Mets are going to sign Juan Soto, and because he's not that great of a fielder, they want to make him the DH every day and put Starlin Marte in right field because his defense is better than Soto's, I can get on board with that, right? I can start to visualize Marte being a bottom of the order hitter with Juan Soto as the DH anchoring with Lindor, whatever they do at first base with Vientos. Like, I can start to visualize that. If you tell me they miss on Soto and they're going to spend the money elsewhere, I start to look at right field as a potential upgrade. Now, Soto can play right field, but I wonder if they maybe move him more to the DH spot. The Mets are more suited. Let's just compare them to the Yankees real quick, because those are the two teams that everyone is linking to Soto more so than everybody else.
Sure.
The Mets are more suited to be able to move pieces around, and on some days Soto can play in right field. Some days Soto can be the DH, whereas with the Yankees, it was he has to play right field because Giancarlo Stanton is our DH because Stanton can't play the field. Right? The Mets, with where they're at with their roster and their life cycle, they have more flexibility. And so I wouldn't necessarily be upset if Starlin Marte is the opening day right fielder, because it might mean that Juan Soto is the opening day DH, and that's a pill I'm willing to swallow, right? I'm willing to take that if Juan Soto's on my baseball team. So again, different ways for it to look. If you asked me right now, I would prefer it to be an upgrade regardless of whether or not Juan Soto is here. I think they can do better in that regard, but that contract is somewhat of an albatross for them to potentially get out of. So I think right now, if I had to guess, Marte would be on the roster next season. All right, 3 DHs for us to discuss, and let's first start with the guy who spent the least amount of time with the team. So the trade deadline acquisition for this team, that being Jesse Winker, who is a free agent, came over and in 44 games since being traded to the Mets, hit 243, 318, 365 slash line, only 3 home runs, 13 RBIs, was a 97 WRC plus and a 95 OPS plus. So slightly below average hitter from coming to the Mets. We know he was dealing with that back injury, but man, I don't know. Those numbers aren't great, but the energy that dude brought, and I think he gave this team even more of a personality than they already had, and that personality was valuable. And I can see a scenario where Jesse Winker's back on this team in 2025.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many things that can change between now and the start of the season, but if there's a guy that could fill in a DH role or, again, more outfield depth, of all the guys we've talked about so far, Marte's obviously going to be on the team, but like I would take Jesse Winker above Harrison Bader, probably above a Tyrone Taylor even, just because of how impactful it felt that he was down the stretch, because of, like you said, the energy that he brought. But also, I think that there's a point that can be made that Winker's numbers declined a little bit from his time with the Nats because of the lack of consistent playing time, and as well as the injury. But I think there is potential for him to be a consistent DH at least, if not also an outfielder for the Mets in 2025. And it's going to cost the Mets more to bring him back because he is a free agent. But we're going to get to DJ Stewart, but I'd rather have, Jesse Winker filling in that role than a guy like DJ Stewart or even, JD Martinez, who's aging.
Oh, you mentioned him, so let's talk about him. DJ Stewart entering the second year of arbitration, played in 74 games for this team last year, and that feels like an eternity ago that DJ Stewart was playing 74 games for the New York Mets. 177, 325, 297 slash line. If you threw up in your mouth a little bit, I can't blame you. 5 home runs, 19 RBIs, an 81 OPS plus, an 88 WRC plus. Look, this just didn't work. The magic that I think people thought DJ Stewart was from what he did in the second half of 2023, it just went away, and went away quickly. And the thing I appreciate the most about this front office, and I think DJ Stewart is the perfect example of it, they will hit the eject button and they will abandon the mission, and they will change their mind if things aren't working. They don't allow things to linger and go on for way too long before making a change, like Mets Mets teams in the past have, and this just didn't work. And yeah, give me Jesse Winker back on this team before I don't want DJ Stewart to be one of my top 5 depth options in the minor leagues next season to come up in a pinch. Like, give me Drew Gilbert over DJ Stewart. Like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Yeah, this was a player that we were maybe higher on than we expected coming into 2024. Is that fair to say? Just because of how good he looked at the end of last season?
DJ Stewart, and every team has a player like this, but DJ Stewart is a player that, like, as Mets fans, we're like, no, we'll show you. You don't think he's a big league player, but watch. Like, he's going, like, every team has one of those players every single year. And for us in 2024, it was no. That second half from DJ Stewart, it was real. Watch him he's going to be the DH next year. And it just didn't work.
To me, DJ Stewart this year kind of felt like the Patrick Mazeika or Nick Plummer of years past, where it was like, wow, there was a stretch where those guys, you wouldn't want anyone else coming up in a big moment, but that was not the case at all in 2024. I have down here, he had a negative 0.2 Fangraphs WAR, which was tied for second worst behind Omar Narvaez and tied with Joey Wendell. And if you remember what the Joey Wendell experience was like this season, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself. So yeah, this is a guy that I think, because of his really lackluster performance to open the year and just kind of stayed throughout the year, but because of what he was as a hitter to start the season, is what led to the Jesse Winker acquisition as a lefty DH option. And I think, again, like I said, going forward, I'd much rather have someone like Jesse Winker, who might cost you more, than DJ Stewart, who's going to be a arbitration second-year player.
My guy ran a negative WAR only playing 37 games defensively out of the 74 games that he played.
Yeah,
like it was
tough.
It was bad. It was not. And here's why I don't worry about this. The front office is going to realize that, and they're going to upgrade the floor, and they're already at it. They're already signing guys. I mean, you tweeted it yesterday that I think it was yesterday when the Mets made another signing, and it was, oh, this guy throws a sinker and he's added a sweeper. Like, David Stearns has a type, and like David Stearns has a type when it comes to adding floor with major league depth. Jose Iglesias, not a great bat, but a really good defender. Harrison Bader, not a great bat, but a good defender. Tyrone Taylor, not going to overwhelm you with his bat, but a good defender. Like Joey Wendell, the idea of Joey Wendell was his defense is really solid. Like, David Stearns has a type when he's looking for floor players to add to the fringes of the roster. It's, hey, we're going to be really good defensively. With pitchers, it's, do you throw a sinker? Have you added a sweeper recently? Have you done those things? Because we like that. Like, David Stearns is showing us what he's looking for with a player. And so I bet you they bring in 3 guys that bring a higher floor to the New York Mets than DJ Stewart does. So I don't think DJ Stewart's going to be a factor for the 2025 team. The last thing for us to get into, and this was one of the last signings that the New York Mets made leading up to the start of the 2024 season. They brought in JD Martinez on a 1-year deal. That was the landing spot for the veteran DH, and it just never got out of first gear. It never was what we thought it was. You look up at the end of the season, and in 120 games, it was 235, 320, 406. It was 16 homers, 69 RBIs. It was a 108 WRC plus, a 106 OPS plus. So he was an above a league average hitter, but it just never felt like the JD Martinez we were signing up for. He was good. It was better production, at least in the first half of JD being up, that we were normally getting out of the DH spot. Like, it was nice to just know you had one guy you can put in there every day. But the New York Mets, since the DH has come to the National League, have messed this position up more than anybody else. Like, they just have not found a guy that they can put there to just be productive and not worry about it. And JD Martinez was their guy for this year. And I won't fail them for the decision, because I don't think JD Martinez was bad, but he was unplayable in the second half of the season. Like, in the postseason, they could barely use him. And even when he was in there, it was basically an automatic out. So it was a really tough thing to see when you wrote in the notes here, he hit 33 home runs last year, and we weren't anywhere close to seeing that version of him.
Yeah. The JD Martinez gamble was kind of a low risk, medium reward move, because he was a guy that stayed unsigned for the entire offseason. Like, the Mets signed him late into spring training. He had to stay, like, gearing up for his appearance in the majors for like a month before he made his first appearance with the Mets, like at the major league level. So I don't really know what to take away from the JD Martinez year. Like, my biggest takeaway, I think, is just, it was really nice to have that veteran presence as a guy who's like old and is able to kind of communicate his approach. And
he was the third hitting coach. He was the third hitting coach for the team, and that provided value. I mean, Mark Vientos, Jose Iglesias credits him for teaching him to hit with a weighted bat. Like, JD Martinez provided value to the New York Mets outside of what his Fangraphs WAR says. But in terms of on-the-field production, it just didn't meet the I'm not saying it was a bad decision to sign JD Martinez. He provided value to this team, but it's very clear, like, the Mets aren't. JD Martinez is not going to receive a phone call from David Stearns in the New York Mets. And I don't know how many teams will be calling JD Martinez this offseason.
Right. Yeah. It just felt like his contributions to the team off the field were more valuable than them on the field, especially during that 0 for, 38 stretch in the most important games of the year. So, it was good to have him in the locker room, in the clubhouse, but going forward, I don't foresee a future for him, at least on the Mets.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think potentially the next chapter for him is some organization might hire him to be a hitting coach in some capacity. I think he has a future there as a coach if he wants it. Let's close with this. We've teased it a couple times here, but the New York Mets did make another signing. They brought in Dylan Covey on a 1-year major league contract, although they did a bunch of these last year, and I saw Ryan Finkelstein talk about this, who hosts the Locked On Mets podcast. Mets podcast. He talked about how they did a lot of these split contracts last year, where they originally were major league contracts when we first heard about them, but they were split between both. Feels like that's what the Mets are getting ahead of here. And I'm going to read your tweet that you can follow Jack on Twitter at JF McKessie. And he said, "Stop me if you've heard this before. Sinker ball pitcher who added a sweeper to his repertoire last year. Stearns clearly has the type as well as faith in the Mets pitching development crew." The New York Mets have shown us with their actions what they think they want to acquire in terms of pitch characteristics. They believe that sinkers and sweepers are in, and they believe that they can unlock, or there's some untapped potential in some players like a Dylan Covey who has that repertoire. I think Covey also has a cutter that he can throw as well. So now you've got stuff moving in just all sorts of different directions, and movement is the name of the game right now in Major League Baseball. And so, again, you're going to see a lot of this. David Stearns is going to acquire all of the arms, and Dylan Covey, I think at worst, is high-quality Major League depth that will start the year at Syracuse. And I think there's a decent chance that Dylan Covey has an opportunity to make this bullpen as a arm that hey, Dylan, you've been a starter in the past. You're going to be a one-inning guy for us. Bump up that velocity on that sinker. Let's work on that sweeper a little bit. And now you've added another nice arm to that bullpen. But David Stearns and co are at work. They're doing stuff already.
Yeah, I think I texted you after the signing. It just kind of feels like this is a guy that we don't really know that much about, especially because he spent, I think, all of last year in the minors, or last year being 2024. And just based off his repertoire, based off some of the peripheral numbers, I could see this being a guy that just ends up throwing high leverage innings for the Mets at some point in 2025 and coming through in those moments, just because of how good the pitching development side has been under Stearns just through one season so far.
Yeah, and look, David Stearns, he plays GM, right? And he said he has GM speak, and he doesn't really give us a whole lot. But there's one thing that he said during the Windsor meetings last year that has always stuck with me, and it wasn't the most novel thing of all time. He wasn't coming up with a completely new theory, but to hear a president of baseball ops say this out loud, it just stuck with me in this way. And he said, the bullpen that we start the season with is not going to be the same bullpen we have in July. It's not going to be the same bullpen we have in August. It's not the same bullpen that we have in September. The bullpen in today's game is a living, breathing organism that is constantly evolving. And ever since David Stearns said that out loud, and I heard him say it, yeah, duh. Of course, you're going to constantly just churn through arms. And so Dylan Covey might be one of the arms that the Mets churn throughout the year. It's what the Dodgers do. They just churn through arms. And so that's the way they're going to. So don't see these signings and go, oh, Dylan Covey's going to pitch all season for the New York Mets. He might pitch 2 months. He might pitch the entire season. The New York Mets, when this season ended, when they got to the postseason, there were 2 arms that were still left from the opening day bullpen. And it was Edwin Diaz and Adam Ottavino.
Yeah.
That was it. Yeah. Every other arm they either acquired in the middle of the year or it was an internal promotion. Yep. So these bullpens are constantly changing. So I don't worry about what it looks like right now on Fangraphs' depth charts. I don't really care what it's going to look like by the end of December. They're going to make additions during spring training. talk to me in September when the playoffs are around the corner, whether or not I think the Mets have a good bullpen, because it's going to constantly be changing. We have concluded
I have one last thing as far as pitching goes that Mets fans might be interested to know. Blake Snell today opted out of his contract. I think we all expected that, but he is officially a free agent and potentially an option for the New York Mets as a rotation piece going forward.
I think my early gut is to pass on Blake Snell. I think that's my early gut.
Based on the walking that I saw in the postseason from the Mets pitching staff, I think I would intend to agree with you, but you never know. He's a free agent. Get him into the pitching lab. You never know.
I need pitchers who have like walk rates in the negatives. Like that's how much 2024 like scarred me with all the walks, that it's not possible, but I need you to have a negative walk rate. Like I need you to just not walk anybody ever. Like
sure.
It was bad.
Yeah,
was bad
I'm with you. So, just an interesting tidbit that I saw.
No, fair. Listen, David Stern said it best. Nobody's off the table. Like every possible opportunity and avenue will be explored to make this team better. So Blake Snell could be one of those options, especially if they don't want to lay out the money for a Corbin Burns or a Max Fried or a Jack Flaherty. Or I wonder if my Walker Buehler dream kind of shattered a little bit with how he pitched at the end of the year, if he's going to price himself out of what the Mets probably want to do there. Yeah. That would concern me a little bit, but plenty of time for us to get into all of those rumors, and we'll sneak them in as they happen. But we have a couple more of these recap episodes to do. I guess we'll try to do all of the pitching in one. It's not going to happen. So I'm just going to tell you right now, expect a starting pitcher episode and then a relief pitch episode next week. We'll see if we can jam them all into one. I'll kind of keep tabs of it as we go through, but you're going to get 2 pitching episodes next week. And then we will start to dive really headfirst into free agency. Like I said, Jack and I have already shared multiple names back and forth of players that we want. And I have one name that Jack knows about, that I texted him about the other day, that I'm keeping quiet. I'm not releasing it on the pod yet, because it's the most obscure reliever that you could possibly find, but he's the most Mets David Stern signing I think I've ever seen. I sent the StatCast picture to Jack, and Jack was like, yep, he's going to be a Met by December. Like, he's a Met. So we will get into all of that here in the offseason, but we appreciate you guys listening. Please do us a favor, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, whatever platform you're on, Apple, Google, Spotify. The best thing that you can do to help grow this show and grow this community is to give us a 5-star review, leave a review, leave your comments there, and maybe we'll read them on the show if we get a couple of reviews in there. On the show. We'll do that maybe in the future. But that's going to do it for us, everybody. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you next time, and let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.